surprising amount of like fun things going on. No, you wouldn't know it. There's a lot of fun that's happening. So they moved the couch here.
And I had to grab to a chair table out there because we didn't have enough.
Oh, yeah, no, it's surprising. There's a whole culture of fun. I know you wouldn't open the doors and let you see. There's a whole culture of fun behind the doors. Yeah, I know, surprising.
Well, I'm on somewhere nice.
Or you just replace it. Okay.
Almost there.
Hey, so.
Ready when you are, Paul.
All right. All right, we're gonna come to order. Veronica, do we have a quorum?
Let's find out. When I call your name, please let me know that you are here. Scott Mars.
Here.
Faith Dayton or Jeremy Malin. Jeanette Ornelas, Hannah Nanez, or anyone with the city of Fort Bragg. Jeanette let me know she is sick and she's not able to make it. I do have an update from her. Joanne Brewer.
Yes.
Joseph Ditto.
Here.
Judy Albert.
Here.
Matt McMullen.
Here.
McMullen. Michelle Collins.
Yes.
Tahira Elliott. Or Priest Martinez, or anyone with Northern Circle Indian Housing Authority. Lisa DeSimone here, and Paul Davis.
Okay.
We have a quorum.
Great. Is there any public comment on non-agendized items? All right. We'll move on to the approval of minutes from September 16th, 2024. Give you a few minutes to look those over and then I'll get a motion to approve those. That would be great. Anyone, motion to approve, please?
I can make a motion to approve the September 16th minute.
I second.
All right.
Veronica?
Any public comment?
No.
Hearing none, when I call your name, please say yes, no, or abstain. And let me just do this a little easier for myself. I think that's a one. Oh, wow. So tiny. Okay. Wait. I guess I. Done. Okay. Scott.
Yes.
Joanne.
Abstain.
Joseph.
Good.
Judy.
Yes.
Matt.
Yes.
Michelle. Abstain. Teresa. Yes. Motion approved.
All right, thanks, Veronica. We'll move on to announcements. We're accepting nominations for the vacant board seat for an individual with lived experience of homelessness, which will be appointed at the January 6th, 2025 meeting.
We've received one nomination for Camille, for me. And if anyone else has any others, let me know, or you can speak up at any time.
Veronica, remind me the deadline. So we're gonna, the seat will be appointed on January 6th.
At the next full membership meeting.
Okay, So we'll vote on whatever nominations have been received by that time.
Right.
Okay.
Can I nominate Dawn?
Sure. Okay, that's 2 nominations.
So remind me just for the clarity, because I think we talked about this before, Dawn is no longer working with RCS? Okay, perfect. Great,
Correct.
okay.
Okay.
All right. Reports and presentation. We have a guest today.
Did I introduce our guest?
Yes.
Okay.
please
Thank you, everybody. I'm happy to introduce 2 guests. We have Heather Dillashaw and Melissa, I don't, Michael, from ICF. Just to remind the board, for like a year, we've been talking about putting together an outside evaluation for our shelter projects. And we finally have that in place. So we entered into a contract with ICF a couple months ago now, who will be doing an evaluation of our 3 shelter projects, Ford Street, Building Bridges, and Hospitality Center on the coast. These 2 are here for the next 2 days, with spending about a half a day each at each of those sites tomorrow and already getting Tuesday and Wednesday. And then there'll be some follow-up activities after that. But since they were in town today, see them in person, we're going to allow you to welcome you and have you introduce yourself and whatever you wanted to say from them.
Great, thanks, Megan. I'm Heather Dillashaw. I use she, her pronouns, and I have been working in this field for over 20 years in various capacities. I started into just doing homelessness services by running a day center where I'm from in Asheville, North Carolina. So this is near and dear to my heart, looking at how people access systems and move into housing. So I've been on the consultant side for about 6.5 years, worked in local government in North Carolina prior to coming to the consultant side of things, and was able to work with Mendocino County through a contract with the state with the ESGCV fund. So Veronica and Megan and I met in the weedy details of how you get paid, right? All that fun stuff. So happy to continue working with Mendocino directly on this evaluation. And my colleague Melissa Michael is joining me.
Hi, good afternoon, everybody. Melissa Michael, she, her pronouns. I'm also with ICF. I am your neighbor to the south, so I'm from Fresno, California. And I've been working in the homeless services field since about 2010 or 11. I came in, if y'all remember HPRP, I came in with that. And I was working at the our Fresno Housing Authority, who was our HMIS lead and as well as our collaborative applicant. I was working on the family services side, and it was like, hey, do you know computers? And it was like, yeah, I do. Here's a 500-page book, learn HMIS. And it was like, all right. Previously, my background has been case management, social services, worked with Department of Children and Family Services, worked with some of our youth programs out in the rural area and up with some of our tribal communities up in Auberry and Fresno. And I have been with ICF for a little over 4 years, doing a lot of HMIS work, but then also shifting into working with communities on strategic planning, governance building, capacity building. So it's a pleasure to be out here, and I'm excited to see how your shelters operate. Coming from Fresno with our climate, we had very few shelters, and so got to see a little bit of that grow before I left working with our COC in Fresno.
Thanks, Melissa. So just how much time do we have?
We don't. We have a line matching.
No, I wasn't imagining a lot, but I wanted to just give an overview kind of what we're doing as part of this evaluation, other than this site visit. And if we have time, just to ask just a couple of questions for you to think about, because we're going to be sending out these questions written. We didn't give you prep time today to do that, but just want to give you a sense of what we're doing. So we're doing, we call this a qualitative part, right? We're going to be talking to people, asking questions, getting each individual's experience, as well as individuals' experiences of being in shelter, as well as staff in shelters, staff at the funding level, those kinds of things. So we really want as comprehensive a view as we can of how people experience your shelter system, both from a funding side, a management side and as residents, right? So that we can get kind of a full picture of that as much as we can. We also are pulling lots of data, right? So you all are entering, or people who are entering data into HMIS and going, up to HDIS and all those things. So we also have pulled all of those pieces, and at some point we'll marry those together, right? We will produce back to you like, here's what we see. This is very much a like, how can we continue to be better, right? In the best scenario, all of our systems addressing any social challenges, right? But definitely in homelessness should be iterative, right? Like it should not be a static way that we run our shelter system or any of our housing programs, all of that. So this is very much not when we go in to do evaluations, I'm always like, you're not in trouble. Like it's not that, right? We are just simply an outside party with some deep data benches to say like, here's how you're doing compared to other communities that may have similar challenges around rural divides, numbers, those kinds of things. So you can kind of see, right? Like, where are we in this? And then think about how you have the resources or what resources do you have locally to make some improvements if you're able to do that, right? Both for yourselves and staffing, but also for folks who need shelter, who may not be able to access shelter, whatever the case may be. And your shelters, I'm impressed with how diverse your shelter system is for as small as you are number wise, right? Like that's impressive. So just so you know that in a lot of places with your geography, do not have nearly the diversity in what you are offering through your shelter system, right? You're lucky if there's one shelter, and that's often a domestic violence shelter because it comes through a different funding stream that rural communities can access. Y'all have that, but you also have other things, which is wonderful, right? But that's unusual, even in California. California's shelter systems tend to be more robust because you have so much state money coming in compared to other places. But y'all, Mendocino County, for whatever reason, I don't know enough of your history to know, but you've done a really great job of having shelters that also offer a lot of other services, which is not generally the case in rural areas. So kudos to you. I know it doesn't feel ever like it's enough, but right off the bat, y'all are in a better spot than a lot of rural areas. More details to come on all of that. Before I go into some of the questions we want you to think about that you're going to get via email, any questions about us or kind of that approach?
What does ICF stand for?
It's a really good question.
Yeah, really good question.
And it no longer, unfortunately, it no longer stands for anything at all.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, we started out as a very small social services consulting company in Philadelphia, and it was called the Inner City Fund.
Okay.
That is no longer related to anything, so we are not just ICF.
Okay.
International, yes. So, but we do, a large part of our work is around social services consulting. And so Melissa and I sit in the part of our company that is called Housing and Community Development. And so Melissa works solely on the homeless services team with all homeless services projects. I do a lot of homeless services projects, but I also have background from my government work in development and affordable housing and all that. So I try to be the person that's like, hey, let's remember homeless folks when we're doing development and all those things across some of our projects. So I get to work a little bit outside of just homeless services, but it's about connecting those funding streams in the development projects that we assist on. So
Heather, we first were introduced to you, or I think Veronica knew you even before, but just to give the board some context, ICF contracts with governments often, right?
Yes.
So it's not, is it typical that I guess we are a government, but a small project like this would hire you, because it seemed like you had a contract with the state.
yes,
Of
so we had a very large contract with the state to implement the ESG-CV funds that were, it was a $300 million pot of money that the state got through the CARES Act. And so we did that. But we also, I run a project with the city of Minneapolis that's around home ARP funding because they're prioritizing permanent support housing for homeless folks. So I'm running that project too. So we have a direct contract with the city of Minneapolis. More of our contracts are at the state level, direct contract wise, but the largest body of our work is actually directly contracted with HUD. So we are HUD TA providers, technical assistance providers. And so the majority of our work does come through those agreements. Like most governments, we're a good example of that right now. The federal government doesn't do a lot of work themselves, they contract that out, right? And so we are also HUD TA providers, which is how Melissa has been involved in Mendocino with HMIS, that Melissa as a HUD TA provider was able to help HMIS capacity building on HUD's dime, right? So that's the majority of our work. We love these kinds of direct contracts because we can be a lot more creative and a lot more detail wise on direct contracts than HUD will allow us to be. Because TA providers, we are not allowed to do work with you, we guide you in the work you need to do, right? So there's some distinctions there on what we can and can't do. And when y'all talk about the COC builds NOFO, we will not comment on anything because we're also HUD TA providers, we have to sign an NDA and we cannot comment on open competitions that come out of HUD, right? Or answer questions or any of those things. To be honest, it doesn't mean we know anything about it or
You're not withholding anything.
doesn't mean we know who they're gonna fund. We don't know any of that. But it's, perception, they don't want folks to think some communities had more of a leg up because they had a TA access team. Yeah.
So some of you have either interacted directly with him or heard me talk about Chris Pitcher, our TA provider. He's also with ICF.
Yep.
When we were doing the HUD HMIS capacity building grant, Chris was originally our assigned person, but he handed it off to Melissa. So she's been involved directly in our community very closely. And can you kind of give me a picture of where Chris fits into all of, not this project, but within your team and your hierarchy? You have this, but where's Chris?
Chris is on the is a senior member of the homeless services team, and he is working. So his role with you is HUD TA, right? That's a HUD TA role that he plays. But he worked with me on the ESGCB project with this direct contact with the state, and he and I are also working on another state level project right now with Cal ICH.
Is that HAP or something else?
No, it's HDIS and I don't remember which bill it was, working with all the departments.
AB 977.
That's it.
Yeah.
So that's a 3-year project that we just started with Cal ICH. So he's doing a lot of that work. So he's still doing a lot of work in California, but moved to the Cal ICH project recently.
Is he also your regional team point of contact?
Yeah, that's the part.
You guys also work with small counties or such as, the Mendocino County, to put all of the different organizations and how they serve homelessness, like some sort of like 1-page sheet. I don't even know if you can, but like some sort of point system where people can see, or like a system where they can see all the different projects and programs that the county as a whole has. Some that are applicable, because I've noticed a lot of counties, not just here, but Virginia, Oregon, certain places I've written grants for, they have all these services, but they oftentimes don't know how to coordinate and discuss, hey, I have this, hey, I can help you with this, hey, I have this, but they do so much, so it's hard to it's like a matrix, right?
Sure. I would say that coordination piece and helping translate all of it is often a part of almost all the work that we do.
Nice.
Right, because you can't just talk about data without making sure that everybody that is accessing that data or needs that data is at the table to talk about what it means, right? So that coordination work, for lack of a better word, right? All of you that are doing this work all the time, it's hard to find the bandwidth to also do all the coordination, right? I mean, I know Veronica does an amazing job and she's one person, right? To do all of that, right? So it's hard to do that. So it does end up being a default part of almost every work project that we do.
So ICF, through the ESGCB grant, they provided us and helped us establish the housing Mendo case conferencing that we now have that facilitates a lot of the local coordination. They also helped to spark me and support me in creating a by name list coordinated entry review meeting. And so a lot of the care coordination that we're doing now, they helped us lay the foundation for.
Nice. Thank you for that.
We're thrilled to have them, if you can't tell.
We are thrilled to be here. Any other kind of overall questions like that, and if you think of others, feel free to, write those down and check with us later. Just want to go through the questions that you're going to get in your email. We are going to attempt to do this. This is high tech for me, but to do MS forms so that you will get a link to fill this out, and we just get the information directly to us so that we can compile that easily with all the different groups of people we're talking to, right? So for y'all in your role as COC board members, some of the things we're interested in are, and again, this is from where you sit on the COC board and your role in the community, right? That's where we really want you to think about these questions. I know some of you play other roles as well, and we are gonna ask maybe slightly different questions in some of those roles. Like if you're a shelter director, I'm recognizing Redwood Community Services, right? You know, that may be a slightly different answer, but thinking as a board person, right? Like that may be you may think about it slightly differently and depending on what role you're answering in. So as a COC board member, and as part of the COC, we're interested in how you would describe the role of your shelters in ending homelessness and in your community. What's their role? What are the goals for your shelters? If you know, right? Like these are the things we want to know. Like, do you know what the goals are? You know, what do you think they are? And also a couple things under that. Does it differ depending on who you're thinking about? We call those subpopulations in the data world, but you know, there are lots of people experiencing homelessness and everybody is an individual, right? So when you think about youth or when you think about single men or you think about families, like, is there a difference, right? In how your shelters operate for each subpopulation you might think of. And then overall, is there equitable access to shelter in your community by anyone who may be seeking it, right? So if I become homeless in Mendocino County, regardless of who I am, how I identify, where I'm coming from, will I be able to access shelter? Then we want to know two to three strengths of your system, 2 to 3 challenges. And then thinking through some of those pieces about strengths and challenges, do you believe your shelter funds are being utilized effectively? And then the only specific one we have around resonance, this is as a COC board member, when you think about your community, I'm assuming, I should have checked this, you all live in Mendocino County? Is that correct? No.
Lake.
Well, Lake County,
Nearby.
right next.
Oh, you're late. Okay, so you're not coming from a really.
Michigan.
No, no,
And I'm thinking you're not coming from the
Like LA.
urban area,
Oh,
right?
like,
Right?
no.
The rural piece certainly matters.
Lake is very rural.
I mean, yes, we worked with them during ESGC. I know all the counties in California now, after the 3 years of ESGCD. I ran that project, was able to run that project, and so got very familiar with all of your counties and your finance departments. As Megan will tell you, the less fun part of.
So not fun.
But we made it, we saved some money though.
We did it, we did it sort of miraculously.
Yep. So as a COC board member, when you think about your community, what resources do you see shelter residents having access to? You know, what do you see the benefits and the things they're able to access because they are in shelter? And then where do you see gaps in the things you see they may not be able to access while they're in shelter? So again, not in your role as like a shelter staff person, but you know, when you think about your community, what do you see? Okay, so those are the kind of the high level overview questions. COC board in that kind of hat that you wear, and you will get those. We're hoping probably the end of the week, depending on depends how much we can get done at night while we're here, but yeah.
Can I can ask a clarifying question, because I realized I think these are really good questions. I'm really excited that you're going to be gathering that information. This evaluation was focusing on our 3 congregate shelters. So
yeah.
I can see respondents to these questions taking into consideration our domestic violence shelters and our youth shelters. So I'm just thinking when you ask those questions, I'm wondering if you want to make sure you know which shelter system. I don't know how to.
We can ask that. So we can name the shelters in the top of the form that we're focusing on. I think it will also be useful when we look at, you know, the evaluation of those 3 shelters, what they are not able to do.
Mhm.
We see it's mostly around youth. I mean, domestic violence can be its own thing in families, but are, you know, youth that are 18 and up, are they able to access shelter? Are there other places, right, that adult shelters? So I think it's useful to have the perspective, even if it's not directly related to those shelters. But yes, I think it is a great idea to name the shelters.
Especially when the question about the different populations,
Yes.
because I think that I
Agreed.
can imagine some people would think, you know, I'm not sure a runaway 16-year-old would feel comfortable here, but I know in our community we have this other resource or something, you know. Like
Yeah, and that's helpful
Yeah.
to know, right? That's helpful to know. Because part of it, right, part of evaluating your system is if someone, and again, I'm totally making this scenario up because I don't know. If a runaway 16-year-old shows up at Building Bridges, does Building Bridges know where to send them? Does that referral process work?
Mhm.
Because that's part of it, right? That's part of a system that is working on equitable access, is that even if where that person shows up cannot serve them, they know how to try and connect them to somewhere else.
Yeah.
Make sense?
Yeah. The other question, so what part of ICS contract is to do some stakeholder interviews outside of the COC board. So I was just talking to Shannon and got the contact of the city of Ukiah who will be kind of away. And are you gonna ask similar questions of that? It's sort of a standard thing. Okay.
Yeah, but we have some, for funders, if municipalities are funders, and there's a little bit, they'll answer the funding question a
A little bit differently. Okay. And I think for the COC board, Veronica and I haven't nailed down that stakeholder list yet. So if you have some ideas, feel free to share them with Veronica and I. We haven't given Melissa and Heather that final list of who to interview outside of the COC board. So I'm interested in feedback on that too.
I wonder if we should get feedback from COC members.
Yeah, we can do that too.
The board, their board is only like 11 people.
Sure.
But we have like 35 members of the COC.
Happy,
Yes.
and I think we said this, to the two of you, that we're happy. I would always love way more feedback than not, right? Like as much feedback as we can possibly get.
Okay. When you hear COC board, no, it's gonna be the full
Membership.
Okay.
Great.
And it's on in your packet and everything.
Great. Thanks, Megan, that's helpful. Any additional questions for us right now? You will get our contact information when this comes out so that you can contact us directly too. You don't have to go through. It's intentional that you don't have to go through Megan and Veronica.
that's right,
to talk to us.
So
That you can talk to us without Megan and Veronica.
that's true.
I mean, I don't know if they're scary or not, but
If
for
we're
you.
scary, we're gonna try to get out of the way. So like Melissa and Heather are visiting these sites without Veronica and I, there will be no chaperoning. So feel free to be
Yes.
very honest.
You know, just because it sounds like you have so much experience in terms of doing studying and surveying other kind of
Mhm.
counties in California and homeless shelters and everything like that. And, overall, it doesn't seem there really is been that much of a dramatic decrease in homelessness in state. And besides the obvious in terms of like, we need more housing and blah, 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 blah. What do you see in terms of?
We keep making more people homeless. That's the problem.
Not you specifically.
In general, right? I mean, we do in my state too. So it's entirely about math. That's why I tell people is wages and housing don't match.
Exactly.
And they continue to not match. And so while we are in California successful at housing people, we are also incredibly successful at continuing to make people become homeless. And so the numbers don't go down. And in California, your housing wage gap is enormous, for lack of a less technical term or technical term. And so homelessness keeps happening, like folks that have held on, and then some, it is often like a life event that happens and they can no longer hold on, right? So that's what it is.
Well, so why wouldn't there be some empty houses? Eventually, just because.
I mean, it depends on where you are, there are.
Yep.
Whether they're accessible is a different question, right? Accessible depending on income,
Right.
need, all of those things, but there are, there are places that there are, vacant housing is a thing.
Well, then does it seem like we should be advocating at another level? So in other words, like if you're saying we're actually creating more homeless people due to the gap,
Right.
okay, so what? Which just keeps happening, it seems
It does.
like, and increasing. Maybe some advocacy needs to happen at a different level.
It does feel to me, Judy, like that we are spending, the upriver, downriver public health situation, we're spending a lot of time downriver pulling people out of the water rather than spending our time upriver trying to figure out why they're falling in.
Yeah.
And I do think that it's a worthwhile conversation to think about. Even in we spend a lot of money on shelter and we
I know
haven't been
we
able to
do.
find as much funding for homeless prevention or people willing to do that work. So there's like I see that as like a little bit up the river, but it's even further up the river, not at somebody facing eviction, but so they never have to face eviction in the first place. And it does seem like there's a conversation to be had of those of us who keep pulling people in the river, who might have been in the river for a long time, like they're really close to drowning. And is that the most efficient place for us to, I mean, we have to spend time there. You can't. just-
Of
Yeah.
course, yeah, of
Right.
course, but I'm just, I mean, that's a very disappointing answer.
But and again, this is one of the, just 1 second, this is one of the places where California is actually not unique, right? I mean, you have all the state level funding. And so when I come here, from the South, and I was born in the South, I've lived a lot of different places, but I'm very Southern family, et cetera. Like, we have no investment from anybody other than the federal government to do this, right? That is the only money that we get to do any of this work. So we're worse off. We're way worse off. We have less services, we have less whatever. But we're also growing the, I mean, the wage gap and the housing gap is still climbing, right? I mean, so, and I say that to say that regardless of level of investment, you are housing more people because you have more resources. But the problem continues to be exacerbated no matter what, because that gap doesn't decrease anywhere. Does that make sense?
Yeah, no, it makes.
So you can pull more people out of the river because you have more resources to do it with, but people keep falling in no matter everywhere. Yeah.
And I think it's just a collective surmount of issues, like with the policies and our laws that create this. It's not just the living wages,
It's not.
working living wages. It's essentially like 70% of Californians don't have enough to pay for next month's rent just in case something happens.
Right.
And that's a big issue because you need that savings to keep you afloat, at least 3 months of savings. Right, 3 months of finding a job at Stater Brothers, Starbucks, intern while you look for another job, like that is what you need to cover you. And it's sad that 70% of Californians cannot. And that those statistics were brought in by I think by a CDFI. And so also there's the laws that are a big issue. And I did a presentation for the Barn Street housing project with Middletown. And I put in the barriers specifically for HCD, and I sent it to HCD so they could send it over to their policy advocates and also to the state of California and Senator Mike McGuire or President Pro Tempe or so whatever.
I sent it.
So that way they can see it. And another issue with those policies and those laws is the fact that there's less housing restrictions when it comes to raising the cost of rents for Californians. Right, so that's a huge component too, because families could afford this amount of rent, and then next month their landlord will say, "Hey, your lease is up in 1 year, so to renew it, we're going to increase it by $200, $300." Well, the family can't afford that, so then what are they going to do? They're going to leave, right, or go into eviction, or be late on payments. It's a multiple snowball effect that has to be addressed at the same time.
What she said. We're good at siloing systems, right? And that's not ever gonna solve the problem ultimately.
But we're doing a great job, though. Don't want you guys to feel like we're not doing anything. I know the NIMBYs and whatnot are always like, nobody's doing anything about the homelessness. They're just letting it happen. It's like,
Which we know is not true.
they don't understand, like, there's people at HCD. I just left a conference with CCRH at Monterey Bay. And there's people who are working on the back end and they're writing bills and grants and like, they're putting all the hard energy and sometimes fighting low key with each other in their departments, right? To push the initiatives to get the people, the right to get housing. And it's all of that work that we all play a big piece in, even if it's a small role. So we are doing the work, we're doing the best that we can. And yes, there's still more to do, but we can ramp it up a little bit. And I think that you guys will be able to help us assist us.
Thanks for giving us time in your meeting.
Thank you.
Thanks. All right, we're gonna move on to updates from local jurisdictions. Megan?
I don't have any specific updates from the county. Just, this is not specific housing related, but I'll share it anyway. Social Services has a new director finally. So yes, our new director started last week. Her name is Dee Dee Parker. She
We're Denise.
she said she prefers to be called Dee Dee. Yes, her formal name is Denise, but she has strong Mendocino County roots, but she's lived in Las Vegas for the past 15 or 20 years, working on their specialty courts. So she has a lot of experience with specialty courts. That would be like drug courts, mental health courts, a lot of experience with child welfare. So she's coming to social services without a lot of deep social services background, but this other perspective that I think is going to be really interesting.
You know, she's worked in child welfare before.
Yeah, she has a lot of experience with child welfare.
And she knew what HMIS was.
Yeah, that's impressive. Yeah, so we're excited. I'm sure it'll be a steep learning curve for her, but social services has been without a director for a really long time. And so it's going to be exciting. I don't think there are any other specific housing or homelessness related announcements. Pardon?
You want to talk about the press release?
Oh, we did issue a press release. I think the data that I shared at the last meeting kind of verbally, we did put into a press release that went out shortly after our meeting. It like nobody paid any attention to it for like 2 weeks. And then it was in the Ukiah Daily Journal. It was on the radio a little bit. So it got some positive, I think, play or whatever. I didn't get any weird, intense, negative blowback, which I see as positive. So that was good to be able to share some of that information. One quick heads up, I think I mentioned last time that the sheriff is working on this task force kind of concept around, it's not really specifically around homelessness, but I do think it's going to impact our street level homeless individuals to some extent. He will be unveiling that at the Board of Supervisors a little bit on December 3rd, but there'll be a more significant workshop on it in the middle of January. The sheriff is interested in developing, I'm going to use the word diversion, but it's not exactly diversion, but because of Prop 36 passed, which we all remember from a couple weeks ago, there's an interest that, this is on the sheriff's side. If a homeless individual, for example, is going to be cited for camping, let's say, or some of the things that are misdemeanors, or I don't know if petty theft will be in there, but maybe even so, or drug possession. There would be an opportunity for that individual to choose to engage in services, and the sheriff would hold that citation before filing it. If that person engages, that citation would not be filed. So there's an incredible amount of complication on their side of the fence in terms of how law enforcement will make that work structurally, but they'll be looking to our team and mostly here at social services, but also mental health and substance use to try to develop the other side of like, if somebody says, I would like that citation to be forgiven and I would like to engage in services, what that would look like. So it might be fun. And I think it would take a long time to get it developed, but I wanted to let you know that was sort of on the table as an idea. That's my update.
Thanks, Martha. City of Ukiah?
Did I talk just last month about the consolidation of the water agencies at all? No? Okay, very indirectly about housing, but important is the fact that there's a joint powers authority that is helping to merge some of the water districts in the Ukiah Valley. So right now that includes the city of Ukiah, Millview, Willow, and Redwood Valley. And what that means is that they will be able to access millions of dollars from the state water board to improve infrastructure. And it means that the city of Ukiah will be able to serve water to all of those agencies. And the reason that's relevant here is that there has been historically a moratorium on new housing development in the areas outside the city limits due to the unavailability of water. The city of Ukiah has plenty of water. We also just signed an agreement that allows us to share water with those other agencies, even when it's not a state of emergency. And previously, that's what that was restricted to. Mm-hmm. So now we can just serve water to those areas. There's room to develop housing. So that's good news for the near future. That goes into effect on January 1st.
Shannon, did the city just happen to have the good wells or the good, like, why do you have water and we?
Yeah, the short story is there's a giant aquifer underneath the Ukiah Valley. We do have amazing wells, but we also have a really diverse water portfolio, which means we have access to groundwater, surface water. And we also have this tremendous recycled water project, which now makes up half of our water distribution system. So we're no longer watering all of these fields, turf, things like that with drinking water. We're using recycled water for those things. We can use that more drinking water for humans.
Oh, well, that's exciting.
Yeah.
Thanks, Shannon. I I know the city of Fort Bragg's not here, but you have a report on their
Yes.
behalf?
Jeanette shared that the extreme weather shelter has opened for the coast, serving Mendocino coastal residents. They have been open 2 nights so far with 9 unduplicated individuals, projected to be open for the heavy rains this week. The care response unit has assisted 2 homeless individuals into inpatient treatment facilities during the month of October. Both were placed at Hilltop Recovery in Clear Lake Oaks. That's it.
Are there any other updates? All right, we'll move to standing committee reports, strategic planning, Megan.
Yeah, I feel a little bit lame because I keep saying we're gonna schedule a meeting and we really don't. But I think we're gonna kick off the strategic planning committee again in early January. So that is the plan.
Shelter and solutions, Veronica.
We had to cancel our last meeting because I dropped the ball and didn't get the meeting agendized in time. So we rescheduled, I got a little bit of feedback from folks who said they just wanted to meet again in January. So, unless I hear otherwise about wanting to meet between now and January 8th, we'll just wait till then and I don't have an update.
And what's next? Diversity, equity, and inclusion.
Actually, next is coordinated entry.
What? You are correct.
Yeah, sorry. So that's me again. We're meeting again this week on Thursday, November 21st at 9 a.m. We're gonna be approving the coordinated entry script. It's a tool to advise screeners on how, what a question is or how to rephrase it. It's just, direction instead of just giving them a screening tool and say, go at it. That is our attempt at increasing the equity between locations. Some of our front door locations have very experienced staff. Well, even on the same team, they'll have inexperienced staff and there'll be a little bit of difference between how those interviews are conducted. And so the script is an attempt at mediating some of those differences by giving more direction to assessors. Everyone has completed the coordinated entry refresher, and we're going to be hosting a Q&A on Wednesday, December, either the 4th or the 5th. Let me look it up. Calendar. December 4th, Wednesday, December 4th at 10 o'clock. We'll be hosting the coordinated entry Q&A for folks who have, that for all of our assessors to get together to be able to ask questions, because there's, everybody's completed the online training, but we a role play, an interview, things like that. So Paul Schmidt, our coordinated entry list manager, he has sent out an invitation for that. So if you don't have that and you want to attend, please let me know.
Veronica, once you've approved that script, can you talk about what the rollout looks like for that then? Or do you?
Well, we're gonna email it with to all of the assessors, clearly. We may go through it or talk about it during the Q&A session. And it'll be available on the CSC website, along with the coordinated entry tool that's already posted.
Thanks.
Yeah.
And I see Faith isn't here, but can you move on to diversity, equity, and inclusion?
Well, Camille's here, so if I miss anything, back me up. The committee hasn't met since the governance charter description was approved. And my guess is we probably won't meet again until the new year.
Yeah.
Sound about right?
It's about right.
I know Denise Gorney has joined the committee, so far we have Camille, Faith, and Denise. And Joanna Olson. So if anyone else wants to join, please let us know.
Membership committee?
Yeah, and me again. Next meeting is to be determined, and I'll get that press release out soon about the membership drive that we decided is going to be ongoing.
All right, and Aya's not here, but
Sure, I got it.
all right.
It's okay.
That she's one person, but it's a little one-sided.
No, we get in these meetings. And we So honestly, the Shelter and Solutions Committee, the reason why it didn't get held is because I'm juggling too many. And since Nick stepped back and moved to Idaho, Joanne Brewer has stepped in just as a figurehead. But I really need somebody who can like, hey, Veronica, we need to set this up, or, these are the agenda items. Can you put that in there? So if there's anyone that's involved in the Shelter and Solutions Committee that could help me out, it's stretching my bandwidth a little too much.
I could probably do that.
Yeah. And it's really just helping me remember, hey, we have a meeting next week. We don't have an agenda, like.
Right.
What are we talking more? I could be more helpful. I just didn't want to like push you out.
I need help.
You're out, you need help.
So let's.
You're out, yeah.
Plugging it in there,
I could be more, yeah. I was like, Veronica's got this, and you kept saying, I got it, so I will be,
Well,
yes.
Okay. Okay.
Between you and you.
Except the push out, Veronica. Okay, HMIS committee. So our color printer would not work. So in your packets, black and white, and these icons look just different shades of gray. So up on your screen, up on the screen here, I've got the data completeness report for the month of October. And remember, this is a standard report built by our HMIS. It's not very complete. And the Fs that you see, so these are the overall data, the universal data elements. There's some additional data elements, and then the HUD verification data items. And then
All the grades.
these are all the grades, and actually this is a little bit different than what you're used to seeing because I exported this into Excel, and then I arranged it instead of by score, by alphabetically by name, so they were a little bit easier to find. And then the ones that got Fs, I put in red. It's really hard to see. 3 of the 5 projects are social services projects and adult and aging services, so we're working on a TA plan with them. And then the other 2, one is RCS's Bush Street Apartments, and I think it's because there's only like 1 or 2 people in it, and there's just some incomplete data. And then the last one, it must have been a duplicative. Northern Circle's HDAP project for the rapid rehousing. And it's the overall score. So it's okay, but we're doing pretty good. Especially if there's only 5 out of, 2 pages worth. And then there's if you want to know more about those 4 categories of data, you can get a little bit more detailed information in here. And then the numbers of folks that were exited during the reporting period and the number of entries. Minimize that, and then additionally, an item came up through coordinated entry where there was a household with children that went to 4th Street Project. Were fleeing domestic violence. Carol Bush did an excellent job of coordinating the person's safety, connecting with Project Sanctuary. But the client, most of the time what happens is Project Sanctuary or Youth Project will stabilize the family, help them to get connected with mainstream resources. And then they'll circle back to coordinated entry and stuff once that family is really stabilized and safe. And that's usually what the folks want to do. But our system needs to be able to accept folks who are fleeing and still be able to have that same level of access. And so we're using this case to pilot how to record a client in HMIS anonymously. Which we've never had, I've done it once or twice way back in the day, like 2010, 2012. But it hasn't come up in a lot of years. And that has actually come to like the HMIS's leads specific attention about here, this is what we've got this request and what do we do? So we've brought it up with the HMIS committee last week, got some good feedback. Diana Gutierrez with the VA is going to talk to Sonoma County and see what their policy is about recording folks anonymously. We'll reach out to TA. We just haven't gotten to that point yet. And this will also, it'll be reflected not just in the HMIS policies and procedures, but also the coordinated entry piece.
I just wanted to add on to this. Veronica and I this has been kind of hovering at the edges, and I'm excited to have a policy because this has come up in other settings. Sometimes we have county staff that are experiencing homelessness. We're able to support them, let's say with a security deposit or something like that. Because so many of our funding sources now require that we enter them into HMIS, it's been harder for us to figure out how to protect that person's confidentiality and anonymity if they want it. And we haven't had a clear policy on how to do that. So I think not only individuals fleeing domestic violence, but there may be other reasons that somebody wants. In the social services world, we call this a confidential case. So in social services, if you're a county employee who's accessing Medi-Cal or something like that, if I go into the system, it's like confidential case, and like there's a whole process for that. But in HMIS, we haven't had clarity around that, and I think it's become more necessary as more and more programs are requiring us to enter data into HMIS.
Dr. Chris,
Yes, that is my plan.
because this is also an intersection to the project that we're working on with Cal ICH. So Dr. Chris, sooner rather than later.
Okay.
I will say I personally been disappointed in the state's response to some issues around anonymous in HMIS. We run a project called Bringing Families Home. Everybody in Bringing Families Home is involved in child welfare. I have been saying, I think this is a major confidentiality issue that you're forcing us to put all of these individuals in HMIS and just getting nowhere. So I keep saying, this seems really strange to me that you're forcing this information to be in a public setting that really shouldn't be. Not getting a lot of, no one seems to care but me and the people that I'm talking to. So I think at least having some policy locally on how we can protect client confidentiality when they, I think will be helpful.
And that's it. Any questions?
Veronica. Ad hoc committee reports. We have the 2024 COC builds competition. Is there anything to say about that, Megan?
Well, I think we're just expanding the committee. We're going to approve the application a little bit later in the agenda today, but right now we just need to thank and disband. I think it was Paul, you did, right? And Teresa and Priest
And
and Camille. Yes, so thank you. It was, we appreciate your, willing to kind of sit through that process with us and we can disband that. I guess maybe do you need to take a motion to disband or we just?
No, it's just public
It's
notice.
disbanded.
We're disbanding it.
We're disbanding.
It won't be
The
on
work
the
is
agenda
done.
anymore.
Yeah.
Brown Act.
Let it be disbanded.
It is now.
Point time count update.
So at the last meeting, we established the 2025 pit count ad hoc committee. The contract funding has been approved. And I just got an email while I was sitting here that the contract's moving forward. I'm waiting for a copy of their updated insurance certificate. This is with Applied Survey Research results, Applied Survey result, or
It's research.
it is research, I think, yeah. Anyway, ASR, and they are gonna be facilitating the unsheltered count as well as providing the mobile application. We had a lot of feedback over the last 3 years that SimTech's counting us wasn't efficient enough in the field. It's really good programming. It's got, volunteer registration portal. But when people were actually in the field doing the work, their system was really pushed to its max. And so we opted this year to go with ASR system. The deciding factor for us was that SimTech was unable to accept an additional GIS overlay map of where the tribal lands are located. Our county department, PA folks, beyond what I know, they had one and they provided it to us, but we were never able to get it integrated. And so we couldn't see where those boundaries were when you're actually using the app. But ASR is able to do that. And so because it's their proprietary tool, I think it'll be a lot better them coordinating and using their own tool when they're doing all of it. I will be scheduling a meeting soon. I just needed to get the COC builds application done and the application will be submitted later this week. So
For those of you who volunteered for the pit committee, expect meetings to begin right after Thanksgiving.
right after Thanksgiving, yeah.
Thanks, Veronica.
Any questions? Public comment?
All right, projects. We usually have an update about the reentry collaborative. Do we have anything wrong about that?
Jeanette was unable to attend the last meeting, so she asked me to provide updates. So it's starting to come back. We had good conversation about collaboration between the jail staff and behavioral health. I know that behavioral health is getting ready to start rolling out the behavioral health bridge housing, which is going to be, providing interim shelter or transitional housing for folks in the behavioral health system. So there'll be more to come out about that. And folks who are with a high recidivism rate, I believe, are a target population. So that's why it came up there. What else did we talk about? The jail is working on creating a plan on how to provide and expanded Medi-Cal services to people in the jail in the last 90 days of their
Sentence?
I guess it's not stay, it's sentence.
Yeah.
And so they're looking at ramping those services up. So there was a lot of focus on that discussion.
Hey, Veronica?
Yeah.
I know that Coltrane Transformation Station and I met with the undersheriff to talk about some of the behavioral health unit that they're growing. Yes, they're interested in the 90 days, but there are certain individuals who are going to be staying at the jails that are less than 90 days. And some of the issues are medication management and that quick response to the outreach and getting them referred out a lot sooner. Right. And so those are some of the issues that we're having. And I give them a beautiful presentation and some solutions, but at least they have it, you know?
Thank you, Camille. That was discussed and you articulated it much better than I could.
So, Veronica, when people are in jail, do they not get Medi-Cal?
No,
Stops.
when you go into jail, Medi-Cal turns off.
Yeah.
But the part of the whole Calian transformation is changing that so that your Medi-Cal would now be reactivated
90 days before you're released?
90 days before. And so
So who's the burden of giving their medication to the inmates?
while they're in jail, the county has a very expensive contract with a provider called NAVCare, and they provide medical treatment while you're in jail. But the communication between NAVCare and the outside has always been extremely challenging.
Okay, so to make the crossover to make sure that then the client continues to receive. Okay.
Yeah, and if they can start billing Medi-Cal while in jail, the client can presumably be connected to the providers that they would be seeing once they're out of jail.
We're making a lot of barriers.
Lot of barriers.
It's just to make it hard on all.
The jail thing,
Really
the
ridiculous.
jail Medi-Cal thing has
That's
been
ridiculous.
really counterproductive for a really long time.
It's
Yeah.
so nice to be educated about how many barriers exist.
And it's even worse because people who are put in jails that have like medications to assist with their anxiety, their depression, maybe
Yeah.
they're on substances that need to get on,
Yeah.
they get slowly weed off of their,
They're just cut off.
They literally will say, oh, we'll give it to you here or there, we won't give it to you one day. And so because of that issue, when they are released, they're worse.
Yeah.
And so, yeah, I can go on and on about that.
It's the same with hepatitis treatment.
Well, I mean-
Getting that, our head on the wall with that,
I
never get those waters.
was just gonna mention that MCHC does have their C2C programs, connections to care, to help bridge that.
MCHC's program is specifically for that population who are being released from jail. It's really helpful, probably not getting enough referrals because they could do, there's a lot of room there for them to provide that kind of service. But there's a ton of stuff happening. I think it's going to be really slow progress, like it always is with jails and law enforcement organizations. So
Well, the population isn't a top priority.
Is that including? Juvenile hall or?
juvenile hall's a similar thing. Juvenile hall's a lot easier to deal with because there's fewer
Right.
kids there. They usually don't stay very long. So if you're in and out of juvie in like a week, your Medi-Cal's not going to get turned off. It's
No,
just
but-
not enough time.
What about like the kids getting the support, like to turn 18? Get out, like, are they gonna be able to get the reentry support?
If I was kind of guessing, because it's a smaller population and the probation department manages juvenile hall, I know that the work around this kind of transformation has been much easier and smoother in the juvenile hall population, just because it's smaller and manager and they're kind of got more of that supportive mindset. So I think that one, you'll see it, some good improvement and probably faster. Yeah.
Are there any other project updates from anyone? All right, we're gonna move on to board protocols and governance. First, we have a recommended action, review nominations and appoint a new COC.
So we have a nomination for Paul Davis on the table, received previously.
Like me to call questions and things.
Sure.
Okay, do we have any other nominations besides Paul Davis for the board chair? Okay.
I would also like to nominate Paul Davis. I'm just kidding.
Okay.
Oh, I can't nominate you.
So since we do have a nomination on the table, does anyone want to make a motion to approve Paul Davis as the COC board chair? And I can't remember, is this a 2-year term, 1-year term, 3-year term?
Why don't we have him finish out
Oh, that's a good idea.
the current term that Dan left? And I'll look and see what that is. And then
To keep it kind of
the
organized.
chair or the vice chair that we'll vote on will finish out whatever Paul's existing.
Oh,
Vice
okay,
chair.
that makes sense.
So those terms, it won't. Yeah, it's just
To keep on whatever cycle we had, okay. So is there a motion to appoint Paul as COC board chair?
I move.
So was that?
She's first.
Judy.
Okay, I'll let Judy move. Priest, do you want a second?
Yeah.
Okay.
Any discussion? Any public comment?
I send a lot of emails.
When I call your name, please say yes, no, or abstain. Scott,
Yes.
Joanne,
Yes.
Joseph,
Yes.
Judy,
Yes.
Matt,
Yes.
Michelle,
Yes.
Priest,
Yes.
Teresa,
Yes.
Paul?
You go for yourself?
Oh, sure.
Okay.
I have a great outcomes. Okay, unanimous approval.
Great, thank you.
Congratulations, Paul. Thank,
Next, we have, we need to review nominations and appoint COC vice chair.
I received no nominations for this seat. Faith was considering it
Now she backed out and then she didn't show up.
and then she never got back to me. So is anyone here willing to be Paul's backup?
Great.
I say brief.
Okay,
Awesome.
can we get a second?
Second.
Okay.
Oh, I can't.
Accept.
Yes.
Okay. Yes, okay. I'm excited. Please. Go, please. So we need someone to approve the motion to approve the priest's nomination for the COC vice chair seat.
What?
We need a motion.
We got the nomination. Now we need a motion. to
I
approve.
can make a motion to approve Priest for the new board vice chair.
I'll second.
That's Scott.
Okay, again, when I call your name, please say yes, no, or abstain, and yes, you can
Yes.
vote for yourself. Scott, yes. Joanne,
Yes.
Joseph,
Absolutely.
Judy,
Yes.
Matt,
Yes.
Michelle,
Yes.
Priest,
Hey, just kidding.
Teresa, yes. And Paul doesn't vote anymore. Motion approved.
All right.
Made it on time.
Thank you, Priest. Paul.
Thank you for all the work that you do.
I have to go.
Okay, thank you, Scott.
All right, we're gonna move on to funding updates. Veronica?
So the ad hoc funding committee met and reviewed our CHDC's application for the COC Builds 2024 NOFO. The ad hoc committee approved submission or recommendation. Let me just look it up. Let me make sure I get this right. Pre-ask. That the COC supports the submission of RCHDC's funding request. So in your packet, starting on page 13, is the letter from Paul. I do have a signed version. I couldn't embed it into the PDF. It was weird. So I just gave you the unsigned version. This is the letter required by HUD that says that the COC supports the submission of it. And then following are the 24 pages of their narrative response. They did an excellent job of meeting all of the data, all of the required components. The committee had feedback and updates requested, all of which were incorporated and addressed. I met with them and helped with, some of the narrative and with that process. I'm very confident in the submission, the narrative, not so confident about my grants.gov skills, but we get there and we're going to make sure that we get everything done. So the funding is to provide $5 million to support the new construction of Marigold Villas, which is to be located at 501 Brush Street, which is the corner lot of Brush and Orchard.
Right next to Ore Creek 1 and 2.
Yes.
Nice.
It will provide 16 units of permanent supportive housing out of the 32 total units that'll be constructed as part of the project.
What are the specifications of the units, like 2 bedrooms, 4 bedrooms?
They were mostly, I mean, you might remember, Michelle, but they were mostly there was only like two bedrooms. They were studios and 1 bedrooms, if I remember.
The 16 units? I don't know exactly what they are.
It wasn't much family
So it's more like, right?
or couple, yeah.
And it's for people who are chronically homeless. So they have to be, meet the homeless requirement of a year or more, either consecutively or episodically. And they have to have a disability. What's different about Marigold Villas is many of the other complexes constructed required a behavioral health issue. This one is any disability, so they can have a physical disability and still qualify.
And so, just as a reminder to the board, the COC submits the chosen application. And then our work is done as the COC.
Once the grants
Yeah.
of submission is made.
If the application is successful on the federal level, and, hats off to our CHCC for trying, but there's not very many awards nationwide. So they're bravely putting work into something that doesn't have it'll be wonderful if it's funded, but if it's funded, the COC we don't have to do anything. It goes directly to the developer and our work is done.
Nice.
Any questions about this response?
I just have a question about that. You said 16 units for supportive housing. So in terms of the funding for because I've always felt like there's been like a disconnect there between the housing and the supportive housing. Is there like funding for the supportive part of the housing or?
That's what they're actually.
Yes, and it's well described in the narrative. In addition to the 16 units, which I'll address in a second, they're also including 8 units for folks with an intellectual disability, no homelessness required. And they're contracting with RCRC to provide supports to all those 8 households. They're also contracting with RCS to provide the same or similar services to the other 16. There's a commitment letter that's included in the application from RCS about the services that they're going to provide. And
I think the remaining 8 on health were just low income without.
I think it's like 7 2-bedroom units.
There's 25 1-bedroom units and 7 2-bedroom units, including the on-site manager's unit. 16 units are for individuals who are homeless and have a disability, 8 for individuals with developmental disabilities, and 7 units for general low-income individuals and families.
thank you, Maurice.
For the supportive services, a one-time allocation, or is it set up in some kind of sustainable way? That's a problem we've had with some of the other projects, is it's promised,
And then when it's not delivered, there's no repercussions.
Yeah, that's been a problem, yeah. So I think my understanding is that our CHDC, recognizing that, we all have,
Sure.
part of their goal in seeking this extra $5 million is to be able to have a pretty strong pool to continue to support those supportive services. But I think it's a concern that is totally valid and well taken, and RCS agrees to provide these services, but they aren't necessarily compensated for it. And it's, it's a problem we've noticed in stage projects. So something to definitely, it's an issue. I think if Marigold Villas is successful with this, it'll be really helpful because we'll just add more opportunity to that site. So I really hope it is successful. That's what they're gonna build this project no matter what. I think this will just give them a lot more opportunity to have it be a good project.
And we can do some coordinated entry
Yeah.
placements.
So can I ask, I mean, when these grants come down, who decides, like, it's just interesting the way the ratio is broken down, like, we're gonna provide this many for families with developmental disabilities, this many with people with mental health, or chronically homeless. I mean, who determines that? I mean, like, this is how we're gonna allocate, or is it set up at the top as the money comes down, you have to?
So my understanding is that when they're applying for tax credits, because they do this tax credit thing, right? When they're developers, they get different points for serving different kinds of specialty populations.
Oh.
So the developer chooses what they think will be a competitive project. Correct me if I'm wrong, Michelle. So
Okay.
you get more points probably if you're serving a homeless population. Or
Okay.
one of the Oak Creek Commons, I think it's one, has a partnership with RCRC and they have some units set aside for RCRC. I think that's worked out pretty well. So I'm sure that's playing into it as well.
Okay, thank you.
But,
Thank you.
And I know one of the things we're working on, we didn't have enough points, so development is working on getting the rest of the project funded too.
it wasn't successful.
One of them was enough.
They seem to kind of know how many points they're gonna get, and so they were sort of predicting,
Okay.
and this one still is pretty close, like it's not exactly what they want. So with this extra funding, I think it'll also help them have a more competitive offering.
And not only that, they have to look at the socioeconomic background with the point system,
Mhm.
because you can't just say, I need 20-30% AMIs, and then you're not in a low income area, like geographic zone,
Oh.
that's defined by HUD, and have like this new tool that shows even by your neighborhood, right? Of course, the neighborhood tool, and they can show you like what is the income level within this area? Does it make sense to have this project here? What about the county? And it just corresponds like the socioeconomic data as well.
Well, it does seem interesting. It seems like all the low income housing is being built on Brush Street.
It's true.
You're right, was able to buy that
Is that what?
a long time ago.
Yeah.
So they bought the whole big.
Whole
chunk of
thing,
it.
and they haven't been able to develop it for decades. But now the funding sources to develop on lands you've acquired already finally happening. It's supposed to be a cycle. You acquire the land and then, then maybe you can make improvements on the land and then the new construction and then, and those cycles got disrupted. Lots of different reasons. I know COVID was a big part of it, but so they're doing catch up, I guess, in a way.
I will say that Oak Creek, there was a little bit of a rough time, I think, when they first started going, but I haven't, it seems to have improved considerably in terms of residents being supported.
Okay. Yeah, heard a lot of noise about Oak Creek.
It's going much better.
That's,
Okay,
yeah,
good. Good to know.
I don't hear nearly as many concerns. Yeah.
I know Dan Wyman was talking about the outreach.
The behavioral health staff has kind of expect like standard hours there now, and they've built connections, much closer connections with a lot of the residents there. So it is going more smoothly. And frankly, there's some people who move in and it doesn't work out. And so after a little bit of a cycle of evictions, not that I'm promoting that, it's not very many people at all, but sometimes it helps things kind of stabilize.
And also we have a great property manager there, or too. So that's helping a lot. And since we have been doing some evictions, people notice that we're serious about them following the rules and people start to behave better. But it's going a lot better.
Yes, I hear very little about Oak Creek. I will say the COC, and we're way off topic, so I'll bring us back at some point, but I do think the plateau, which if you remember, the COC did fund at a pretty high, investment through deep funding, $3 million several years ago, is struggling. And we probably are overdue for requesting some reports from there. I do want to bring that report back to the COC since we did, allocate that funding through the COC. Now, it was 2020, but still.
Well, I just want to say I appreciate getting more of these kind of historical kind of elements because sometimes it's a question in my own mind, like why, what, and the people who have the answers are sitting right here, so it's nice to get them.
Okay, so I guess we need a motion to approve submitting our CHDC's application, the COC application on behalf of our CHDC.
I'll move.
Okay, please.
I'll second.
That was Teresa? Yeah. Any additional comment or discussion? Any public comment? I'm just gonna go, Paul. When I call your name, please say yes, no, or abstain. Michelle, you will have to abstain. Okay. Scott had to take off. So I'm gonna say abstain for him. Joanne,
Yes.
Joseph also had to leave, so we'll put abstain for him. Judy,
Yes.
Matt,
Yes.
Michelle, abstain. Priest,
Yes.
Teresa,
Yes.
motion approved. Yeah, because that's 3, that makes 8. Okay, yes, motion approved. I'll make sure. Well. We have a quorum.
Depending on what your bylaws say, abstain may count as part of the quorum. They should technically be listed as absent. I don't know what the bylaws state.
Well, I have the ones, well, when they leave, if they leave, do they go to absent?
If they're not here, they didn't vote.
And I have to abstain.
We should have made a vote before they left the room.
Let's do this,
But yeah, it differs from different agencies and organizations as to whether abstains count towards the quorum.
Do we have a quorum anymore? Yes, we need 6 out of 11 because we don't, or we have a vacancy. Okay, motion approved. Motion is approved for sure. Barely, but yes.
Thanks, Veronica. And we have no updates about this other things, right?
I don't, I still haven't heard anything about ESG. They haven't released the 2024 no-call, whatever they call it. No other updates.
Okay. Then,
So it says our next meeting is January 6th. Do we not have one in December? I can't remember.
No, we always cancel our
Cancel
December meetings. And the 3rd Monday in January is Martin Luther King Jr. Day. So we move it a week early.
Early.
So the COC meeting will be on the 2nd Monday in January.
This looks like the first.
Oh, I think it is. I got the wrong date.
You don't think it's January 6th? You think
No,
it's?
I think it's the week after that. Yeah, I think I made a mistake.
So it'll be the 13th?
The 13th.
Okay.
The 6th, by mistake.
Okay.
Okay, so the next meeting will be on January 13th. Here at 1:30. And then our February meeting will be the 4th Monday, which is the 24th because of President's Day falling on our regular scheduled day. And either at the January or the February meeting, one of the two, I'll come back with the 2025-26 board meeting schedule.
Okay.
So when is the next meeting?
The 13th,
Of January.
January 13th, no December meeting.
All right.
Good.
all right,
We'll see some of you later this week.
Okay.
meeting adjourned. We'll see you.
See you tomorrow, I think. Well, I think it's Wednesday.
I think it's gonna be. You guys are good.
It's gonna do it.